All right, hello everybody, and welcome back to the Dead Draw Gaming Podcast. We are back. This is our last podcast before EUIC, so there's a lot to talk about, a lot to cover. Before we get into it, though, let's go ahead and introduce all of our friendly faces here for the podcast. We got two new faces and one returning face. So, Braiden, how you doing?
Great.
Excited to be here. Excited to have you here. Actually, I mean, I'm excited to be here too, but I'm excited to have you here. Jake, how you doing?
Pretty good. How are you?
I am excited. I am excited for you to talk about your Vancouver run, which we'll go over in just a little bit. And then Hunter, having you finally on the podcast, finally meeting you for the first time.
It's nice to meet you. Appreciate you having me.
Yeah, I'm very excited. I was really glad to get you on because I know because you don't have all the social medias and whatnot, but I'm glad
No,
Ryan was able to
the
do it.
internet, so here I am.
All right, cool. Before we get into it, want to mention that we're having a giveaway for the YouTube channel. We're trying to push for that YouTube partner status. We need 1,000 subs, so we're going to do a giveaway of a Paldean Fates Elite Trainer box to a random YouTube sub. We'll be doing that during the next podcast within 2 weeks. That should be, yeah, that'll be the week right after EUIC. So you have 2 weeks to sub if you have not done it yet, but you should definitely sub. We've done a lot of cool tabletop content, me and Jake, and also Edwin, special guest Edwin. And we have a lot of other cool content that I'm working on with other various DDG members that should be coming out soon. It's just kind of slowed down because EUIC is taking up everyone's time, but a lot of other cool stuff coming up soon. Really excited for it. Definitely subscribe if you have not already. And with that, I think we're going to start off this podcast by talking about Paldean Fates format because it is now over. Another one of those super long kind of formats. And we just had our last event of the format, which was Vancouver. Jake was there and got a top 64 finish. So I think we should just go ahead and start off with talking about your run, Jake. How did it go?
Yeah, so I played Gardevoir EX. I started off really well, 5-0 with a win on stream, and then I completely threw my round six. I hit Caleb Gedimer. They were playing the whole Caleb, Azul, and Grant were playing and Grant Shen, the two Grants, and we're playing the Charizard deck with a couple techs for the Gardevoir matchup and some other decks like Avery, Lost City. And then they were going with this really weird, like not taking any prize card strategy, just heat tackling with Charmander. And so I had played a few games against like this type of waiting strategy from Charizard. Mostly it happens by accident, where the opponent just isn't setting up, so they aren't attacking. But Gardevoir really, like, you lose the game if you take the first prize. So it's all about just waiting, setting up your board, and then taking a 2 prize KO with boss as like your first KO of the game. And so we played like a long game. I'm sure Caleb heat tackled like 10 times. And then I'm just retreating between things. And while setting up my board, but I had some like tricky prize cards to work around. Like I had a psychic energy and a rod in my like last 3 prize cards. So yeah, what like the ideal strategy is just to take 2 prizes with a boss with a shiny Arcana Gardevoir or Gardevoir EX on like a Rotom or Lumineon or Pidgeot EX, and then just try and stay ahead with Zacian. But I was like low on energy, so I couldn't do that. But it came down to like the very end of the game. And I basically I had game. I had enough energy because I took the energy off the prize card. Um, and so I had exactly enough to Zacian for the KO. And then I shiny Arcana, and I realize I have no cards in deck, and I can't Ultra Ball away my energies, which I just had to Ultra Ball one away before that, and then attach a return, and I would have won the game, but I did not do that in the right order, so I ended up losing. And then you had a pretty mediocre finish to day one, going from 5-0 to 6-2-1. And then in day two, I had some unfortunate unfortunate starts, like up against a Roaring Moon player who, from a board of just Roaring Moon and Greninja on the bench and like Lumineon active or something, and then no energy in play, he manages to get a catcher Cologne Greninja play on turn two and to wipe my board. So that was not fun. And then in my last round, I hit Reagan Retzlaff playing the Chen Pao, and it was like a close set where, game one, he won game 2. His start was pretty poor. I won. And then game 3, I had like a really weird opening where I just attacked with shiny art, like candy, shiny arcana, counter catcher, kill the barrel or something. And then he managed to get like, so from like 5 cards in hand, no barrel in play, he manages to like Iono into like a few energies. Or no, yeah. So he plays canceling Cologne off of the, like, before he Ionos, and then Ionos into like some dead cards. And then Pokey stops into double cross switcher, and hits the switcher Cologne kill on my Curlias,
You had
which
some
was not
great luck in
fun.
this tournament.
Yeah, this is the regular with
Yeah,
Gardevoir.
I feel like usually it's just you prizing and having horrible luck with that. This seems more of the more just ridiculous stuff from your opponents type of luck.
Yeah, yeah. Radiant Greninja was really killing me this tournament.
Mm.
And then yeah, so it ended up like I had a chance to come back if I like drew Candy Guardy off of some Arcanas, but I didn't hit it. So this was like, we played a pretty long game 1 and then like shortish game 2. But like we made a gentleman's for game 3 that if it was like obvious on board state that who would win, give it to them. So I ended up giving it to Reagan because I missed the candy and I was gonna lose anyway. If I hit the candy, I would have had a chance because his like board was pretty like not well set up, so I could kill the active Chen Pao, I think, at that point. And then with like Arcana, and then like boss KO Bibarel with Gardevoir EX, and hope he missed like with an Iono and counter catcher, and then hope he missed the KO. So I probably would have had a decent shot, probably like a 50-50 at that point if I hit the candy, but I missed the candy. So yeah, I gave him that and ended up in top 64, which I mean, considering how many games I how many games I lost to all those Greninja stuff, it was I'm fine with the finish.
A tie
What?
would a tie wouldn't have been 32.
No, it
Win
was
for
like,
16 and lose
no, it
for
was win for 32, lose
Mm.
for 64. Yeah, we were both at like 28 points going into the round, and like 31 was safe for 32.
Okay, word makes sense. Checks out to
Gotcha.
me.
Yep.
Cool. Well, I mean, still a great finish, regardless. Very funny run, it sounds like. I know, looking at Dead Draw Gaming overall, a lot of team members did really well at the tournament, and it's also worth noting that I think like 5 out of 7 or 5 out of 6 or whatever that were in day 2 were all playing Gardevoir as well. Definitely, obviously, seems like a strong call for the event, strong call in general for a lot of this format. And now that Gardevoir deck is basically dead and gone, technically Gardevoir EX remains, but we lost the baby Gardevoir, and the deck itself is completely, completely different than it used to be. We also lost Mew and some other cards. So I kind of just want to go around and get everyone's kind of final thoughts on this long format before we move on and talk about the future now that this format is effectively behind us. Whoever wants to start with it.
I
And
mean,
I like this format a lot more than I think most people did. And I think a lot of people like kind of cried out complaining about kind of how the meta is with, you know, that you can only play certain decks or whatnot. But I actually think there was a very wide pool of decks in this
For sure.
format. And
Yeah, it's really wide.
I feel like all the tier decks had their, or all the tier 1 decks, excuse me, had their moment of being popular and strong. Like the biggest example for me is just like Miraidon in the beginning of the format. It was like this, you have to respect it. After one LAIC, the hype went crazy, having a good Gardevoir matchup, something like that. And then in the middle of the format, just literally just fell off the face of the earth. Like, when Charizard became a little more popular. So I like the ebb and flow of this format. I wasn't exactly happy with the card pool if I had to complain about anything. I feel like this format did not have an incredible amount of innovation, but it did have a nice rumbling every other tournament meta change, which I think I enjoy as far as formats go, where it's not like a Lugia or a Zoroark format where it's just like there's clearly one deck that is way better than everything else, and then like all these side decks that either you beat the counter or you're just beating the top deck and doing kind of okay against everything else. I liked the rotation of Tina, Gardevoir, Charizard being like the top dog, and techs coming in and out of decks throughout the format. I felt like it was pretty balanced. Nothing really to complain about. Pat's a good card. That's all I have to say.
Yeah,
So,
I'm like a huge fan of this format. It's like Hunter said, it's not it wasn't ever great for like innovating. Like the only like real innovation we saw was Ross like just putting Roaring Moon back on the map. But I think the gameplay overall, if we ignore Battle VIP Pass and some Greninja craziness, I think the gameplay is like the best it's been since like tag teams came out. Since we like back in the Zoroark formats, where there was so many situations. Like if you played a deck like Gardevoir or Charizard or Tina, there were so many like stalemate situations you'd run into where just not like passing was correct, or like you could come back from like a pretty poor board state with like thanks to Iono and like like the Charizard deck. Like if you take out Pidgeot, you can come back from Ionos in crazy places. And yeah, there's like lots of different types of decks. There was stall decks, like comeback decks, super aggro decks, like cool concept decks like Lost Zone stuff. Giratina, you just getting to a certain number of cards in Lost Zone is just an interesting thing. So I think this format is like one that like I might end up playing in the future, like as a retro format to go back to, because I think there's a lot of interesting matchups. And even towards the end of the format, people were innovating with the gameplay, not so much like the card inclusions, but like with what we saw at this tournament with Azul and Caleb bringing that, like the unique strategy, the unique approach to the Gardevoir matchup, which ended up winning. I think Gabe Smart and Piper both ended up losing to that list with that strategy at some point. But yeah, and I was close to winning it, but threw it away. But I think that like type of gameplay innovation is something that we haven't seen in a while, where there's so many like alternative routes to winning the game, aside from the obvious, which I hope we see another format like that soon. Because from what I've been testing with post rotation, it's a bit less unique in that sense. There's not as much like stalemate action, which is sort of my favorite.
Yeah, especially getting the Iono counter catcher play, like that kind of just ruled the whole format. If you get that playoff and you can just come back from a couple prizes down, you just win.
For sure. I think what Hunter was saying is like I feel like that this much ebb and flow in a format was really interesting because effectively Paldean Fates changed very little for the format.
nothing.
Yeah, basically
Yeah,
nothing.
didn't
It
change.
made Charizard like 2% better. Didn't
But
really
it did
matter.
round the circle though, because it made a full circle. LEIC, most popular deck Gardevoir, was won by a counter deck.
Yep.
By the end of the format, the big Miraidon that was getting countered by Charizards and Roaring Moons, then came right back to Gardevoir being the best deck. It went full circle.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
in my
It's
mind, it kind of just feels like this was how it was supposed to go, pretty much. I don't think it was supposed to like have any like I don't think we're missing any decks. I don't think we're missing um like we weren't robbed of, oh, this format's boring, the same decks are too powerful type of nonsense that I've heard people have said, So
Yeah, I mean, we saw decks completely, like you said with Miraidon, even like Rapid Strike was, people thought it was kind of dead as before LAIC, and then it did pretty well at LAIC, and then it became a really good deck for a while, and then just completely fell off the face of the earth as soon as Ross's Roaring Moon list took off. A lot of other decks just kind of ebbed and flowed and stuff. Miraidon again got really good towards the end, and it's really cool to see. I think for a long format, this is what I hope for, what I dream for. I would still prefer more sets coming in on a regular basis instead of like one really long format and a bunch of 2 month formats because that kind of sucks. But this was a good format to be a long one. I think there was a lot of time for it to breathe and a lot of cool things to experiment with and let decks become good and become bad and then become good again. So I think that's all we really have to say about the Paldean Fates format. We'll miss you. We will not miss VIP Pass or
won't miss you.
VIP Pass is
No.
like
Oh,
ATM
pass can
machine,
go.
If
but
there's a good player out there, like above average, made multiple day twos, have made worlds invites that think Battle VIP Pass is a good card, I just start to really question what you think about the game as a whole.
oh, it's
I
a broken
really
card. That means it's good, right? So
don't know a pro player that's like, I'm really going to miss Battle VIP Pass. That one I'm going to miss.
Ooh, I opened 2 of these? Oh, I'm probably winning.
Okay, so I want to talk about EUIC format slash temporal forces. We're going to start with kind of general temporal forces thoughts. Kind of just wanted to start with first impressions of the set. I know all of us have been playing it a lot, even before the set officially came out, but it is now officially out. Everyone's actually playing it. The online tournaments are going on, and we actually have online tourney results. Just, yeah, just first impressions of the format.
Well, I was looking at the Iron Hands deck, and that deck is very real and very scary. I thought the deck was gonna suck, and you put some gift energy, and they can draw out of Ionos and just blow up
Sure.
everything because they are doing like 180 damage with taking extra prizes. It's pretty good.
Well, you don't have to worry about it now because everyone internationally is not playing the gift energy, so at least that part you don't have to worry
I don't
about.
know.
Everyone online is just playing psychics instead. I think gifts are still really really good though.
I mean, I posted on Twitter like a few days ago that there's a lot of similarities to this format and 2014, where we have a bunch of the same decks basically copy and pasted. And I'm not a huge fan of 2014. Yeah, I'm not really a huge fan of this format either. I think it's a bit better. There's more decks, more interesting stuff going on. But I think with rotation. And with the new set, we're losing a lot of those uh, comeback strategies being like the top of the metagame, where I think it's more just like straightforward. If you set up with this deck, you're going to do well. Like Lugia and Charizard. Charizard's still pretty interesting, but yeah, like Lugia being at the top, it's really just like do the sequence of events how you're supposed to, and you'll win the game if you do that. Otherwise, you lose the game. And there's also more Greninja cheese in this format, which I'm not a fan of. Uh,
You just
the,
hate
they,
my boy Ninja.
yeah, I hate him. They printed for some reason item Guzma, so Chen Pao is now like,
Trophy.
yeah, Chen Pao can both play Iron Hands and
yeah.
Guzma Cologne
Oh, it's so
kill your
annoying.
bench.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not a fan at all of Chen Pao. I mean, I'm glad that it's a deck that like it's hard to play at the best level, like very hard to play at the best
Yeah.
level. But at the same time, it's like it's not that hard for a mediocre player to accidentally draw into Cologne, a prime catcher, kill my bench. So yeah, if that was a harder play to do, then I'd be fine. But yeah, it's a bit too easy, I think.
So it's funny that Gearhart says 2014 because this, for me, that this specifically how the decks are and stage two is becoming like kind of middling out we're middling out the basic decks and the stage twos are starting to outweigh the big basic decks. This format kind of reminds me of like 2010, 2011 when we had the mid-season rotation where it's like you had all the SP stuff that gained new cards like gain new broken cards, but then all the stage two decks started becoming real threats. You know, Machamp, Loscar, Vileplume, all this type of stuff. We don't have any lock decks like that right now, but for me, it feels really reminiscent of that, where it's like the decks that were already strong got stronger if you utilize the new tools, and then because this set has so many uh, interesting cards that kind of open up other decks, like a supporter I'll use for example. My favorite card in the set is the Mallow, the Cryptomaniac. And this kind of cards like this and cards like Relicanth kind of just open up weird things to be happening with other sets, the Cryptomaniac and Relicanth specifically. So I like that it kind of gives new life to innovation, but also clearly has top contenders and a little bit last year too with the Arceus deck that won the EUIC with the rotation and with the new set, where it's kind of like the last couple new format, new set wins are usually from a current deck that got better and is totally fine having a mixed of 50-50s, not too many things that are auto wins. Dura is the exception of this point. But, these type of formats to me feel pretty good. And as far as like my testing going, I feel like I haven't felt anything is too ridiculous besides. Charizard and Chen Pao, which I think both of them in their own right do have matchups that they don't want to play against. So right now, I'm not saying it's out of hand yet, but Charizard could totally be out of hand, and I could see that happening. We have something like a 23% Charizard at EUIC, and then the one happy-go-lucky person or good player that picks up Charizard and just draws the nuts all weekend. There's just not going to be anything you could do to stop them from winning. So it's totally possible.
Yeah, like I probably wouldn't hate if Charizard did become like a huge deck, because it's like the gameplay with it is like it could be worse. Let's say that much. But it's like there's a lot of like stuff you can do to, like, because Charizard's damage output is so low early game that like you don't have to worry about just like your board getting wiped turn one or whatever. Whereas something like Chen Pao, I'm a bit more worried about that becoming the deck, because yeah, then the gameplay gets a little bit worse when you can't, like, there's a lot of stuff you can do to beat Charizard. It's just that it's hard to beat Charizard and have a fine matchup threat against everything else. Whereas something like Chen Pao, it's even just beating Chen Pao is a bit difficult, I think. And also, like, trying to beat Charizard and everything else at the same time is tough.
The last thing I'll say about the beginning thoughts, which is that we're in a go first format now, and if a lot of people haven't picked up on that, you probably need to pick up on that. And I enjoy that a little bit more than the go second YOLO into VIP pass supporter and have a better setup than my opponent. So I do like the go first aspect of a lot of the top decks and just the format in general, where feels like there are decks that can choose to go first and are fine going second, and there are decks that want to go first but can go decks that want to go second that are fine going first. So it feels like a little more less coin flippy right now for having to YOLO for second, or you're the Gardevoir player having to YOLO for first with your flips, or you're having a bad time. So I enjoy that too.
Yeah, I think Buddy Poffin really made the replacement for Battle VIP Pass a lot better because you can play it every turn.
Yeah, it's so nice as like if you're playing Lost Box, right? There's so much less pressure to like go second and maximize your odds of getting your VIP passes, because if you just get like one flower something off turn one, you can still get the Buddy Puff in turn two and still explode the next turn, and it's totally fine, totally chill. It's not a big deal, and I really like that a lot. So yeah, looking into kind of the early online tournament results, so far it's been a lot of Zard, a lot of Future Hands, and a lot of Lugia. Those have been the three most popular decks. I believe I wrote them in the correct order. Yeah, Future Hands has actually been like number two most popular. A lot of matchup data for it too. And I think the thing that's most surprising about that is kind of which decks aren't popular that people thought would be popular. But before we get into those other decks, we should probably talk about these three decks, because I think it's very likely that these three are the most popular decks for EUIC. We talked a little bit about Zard. We can bring up one of the Twitter questions we got to kind of start the conversation about Charizard, from Bob McDougall, which is asking, what reasons are there, if any, to play Bibzard over Pidgeot Zard? We saw kind of the back and forth in Japan where they're all doing the Bibzard.
As the Zard resident in this phone
Yeah.
call. As a person who's pretty much played Zard for the past 3 months exclusively, there is absolutely zero reason in any form, way, shape, or form to be playing Beedrill over Pidgeot. We've gone through this 3 separate times where everybody, I'm going back to Evo Zard, we're going back to Bib, new set, Bib, we want to draw cards. There is no supplement of random cards off the top of your deck when you're not a deck that thins cards, instead of a deck that wants cards in their hand to then choose what card you want from your deck.
Yeah.
So I think not only are you frail to weird strategies, like I'll just throw one out there, is like Delphox and literally Lost Box, any type of weird fire deck, Mr. Arc Fire over here.
Hey man.
Any of these random Delphox decks that you play against, you have collusion against that. You have collusion against Sableye. It's just worth having the HP and being able to. I shouldn't even be arguing the HP point. Really, it's really just the power of Pidgeot. But just to give you
so
a real deal scenarios here as to your engine being weaker, like there's just no reason to play a stage 2 deck and now add more randomization to your draws, and especially when you're not playing an engine that plays enough discard cards to draw 4 or 5 off Bibarel. You just don't have the cards in your deck to do that. And I think popularity in Japan for this simply has to go with the luck kind of based decks that they're always into, because in my opinion, with their culture, like Japanese people are very into, like, I'm not hating on Japanese people. They're into gambling. They're into being lucky, and I always wear my favorite thing. I always have my favorite thing. Gamers are like this too, where they just are really into the luck based decks. And I feel like when you look at the city leagues now, when you go from like a couple weeks ago and you look and see all the bib rolls topping, and now you go look and there's no bib roll to be found. All the wins are with Pidgeot. I mean, it's just kind of they full circle themselves. Everybody copes themselves when the new set comes out and they put Bibberol back in their Charizard deck. But we always come back to the same spot. So don't play Bibberol, burn them. You don't need them.
Yeah, I think the reason why like everyone shifted in Japan is specifically because they really needed Max Belt and Mist Energy to deal with like the overflow of Zar or Giratina, and Max Belt just covers you for a lot of other matchups too. And if you're not playing Pidgeot, you're just never getting those cards when you like actually need them. And like without, if you're not playing Pidgeot, you kind of need the Prime Catcher because then you're just never drawing like the gust you need on the turn you need it and all that kind of stuff. And it's just kind of a nightmare to draw into all these pieces you need because the Japanese meta kind of rotated and moved around Bibzard, and now it's just completely irrelevant basically. And I think the fact that they got to that point before it even came out here just means we can skip that and we don't have to worry about it, honestly.
I mean, I think also on the point of like randomness, like a lot of things change in their formats because they're playing best of one and we're playing best of three, which is a much more consistent like way of playing the game, where you do have to get high rolly to do anything in Japan. But I will push back on one thing that I do think the Barrels art has like a slight reason that you could go for it is just I think Radiant Charizard is like a really, really strong attacker in this format and pretty underutilized. And being able to play a game where you like Radiant Zard multiple times without putting any two prizes in play is like a strategy that is worth looking into. Like one of Charizard's problem matchups are like the Arctina and regular Lost Tina because of Iron Leaves. They just are able to one-hit KO your Charizards like multiple times in a row. And they'll end up winning the trade because they'll initiate the trade. But if you can get multiple Radiant Charizard attacks and even play like Choice Belt in the deck, then you can sort of always guarantee you win the prize trade that way, which is something that the Pidgeot version doesn't really have. Like you have to hope an Iono sticks and that they won't find their gust effects to knock out the Pidgeot with Giratina. So that's the one thing that Bibarel does have an advantage over, or sort of any other like one prize engine like Burlia. But yeah, there are a lot of downsides to that as well.
Yeah, searching for any card in your deck is just way too broken to not play. I mean, you can't argue that. Also, just for everyone out there, I think Max Belt is the correct ace spec in Charizard, but never know.
I'm not a Max Belt lover, but I don't want to debate just yet.
Okay, all right. That's fair. So the next deck to talk about then is the new deck of this format that has been kind of sweeping the nation, which is Future Hands. It's a deck that is definitely very scary. Can obviously being able to take two prizes with one prize knockout, but also having damage amplification on top of that is pretty terrifying to just randomly get an extra prize on like a 200 HP Pokemon. Very effective, very powerful. How scared should people be of this deck? You mentioned it earlier, Braiden. Are you super worried about it?
You know, I'm pretty scared of it, to be honest, because everyone's kind of trying to play setup decks, get your stage 2s out, but the deck just goes so fast. They're attacking turn 1, taking a KO. They have Prime Catcher. They're taking 2 prizes, going to 3 by, their turn 2. It's pretty scary.
Yeah, I actually wrote an article about the deck. I thought that I was cooking before the Japanese tournament actually came out and was like, man, this is way too good. I don't know why anybody would even entertain putting the other future cards in the deck. Why are we not just playing Iron Hands in this? And I worked on the deck a decent bit. I do like where I have it. I'm playing a kind of a different version than other people are playing. I don't play the Prime Catcher. I play a Reboot Pod, Energy Switch, and Raichu package that I'm using basically as your end game blow up against Charizard. The worst matchup you actually have as the Iron Hands deck is Charizard, but it's okay to go into this format and have the kind of plan of I'm going to beat everything around Charizard, and maybe Charizard I'm close with. So Raichu has been pretty nice for that. It is a harder combo to pull off. You kind of do need the gifts to go off, and I play a heavy supporter count in the deck. But I do think it's a real deck. I think it picks up some good equity versus the Lost Box decks that are picking up popularity. I think it does okay in the Chen Pao. It obviously dunks on Lugia. That's, neither here nor there. That's a nice matchup. I will say, without Tex, I think depending on your list, if you're going with that straight 4 hands, 4 crown to Miraidon or whatever, you do have problems with like Arceus variants, and I think you have problems with Charizard. But I do think the deck is solid. That all being said, I don't think it's a top 3 deck, and I don't think it's going to be top 3 popularity, and that's my opinion, because I think there are 2 other decks that are much stronger than the Iron Hands, which Chen Pao is definitely a lot stronger and a lot more power level as far as coming from behind, coming from ahead, having 2 prize turns, having multi-prize turns, all these types of things. But I do think it's a solid deck. I think you should get reps against it. And I think if you want to make the deck work, you kind of have to go away from the strategy of all I have is hands. I don't think that's going to run you through a tournament where we're in the Wild West and there's 40 archetypes.
Yeah, I hate hands, so I hate this deck.
Just gonna say I hate hands, and that
was I hate Plasma Lugia from 2014, and this is the same deck. Again, it does the exact same thing, and I don't like it. So I hope I can play something that doesn't lose to it, or that it's just not popular enough to care about. But yeah, it's another one of those gatekeeper decks. Luckily, it's not like the top of the metagame right now. There's stuff you can do to be fine against it. And luckily, this format isn't going to last for so long. And we have that Greninja EX coming out that is fighting type and should destroy it.
Yeah.
So I'm happy about that.
Yeah, the fact that even though it's top 3 in online popularity right now, there's a good chance that's not the case at EUIC, not because of the deck not being good or whatever, but solely because the Iron Hands are now $20 a pop. So it's really expensive if you want to put this deck together right now. So if you didn't already get your Iron Hands, then it might just be one of those decks that just prices out a lot of more casual players, which is not something that's very common in the Pokemon trading card game, but might actually be relevant. Even the Iron Crowns are expensive right now, too.
It just feels like the Miraidon / Roaring Moon of right now, and what is fun to play. But I think what people will realize as they're playing it is that it really only wants to be matched up to a very minute amount of decks. And then of those minute amount of decks you want to get matched up to, the other matchups you're going to have to draw very hot to be able to stay up. And you'll have to be able to dodge vacuum to keep your energy on board, which I think is also a giant problem with the deck.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, I don't think Moon was very good in this format, and everyone kept playing it, though. So I really think everyone's going to play this Iron Hands deck, because it goes fast, and it does some things. You can hit some people out of nowhere.
For sure.
For sure.
Also, one important thing to mention when you're trying to beat this deck is that Beach Court, it turns off the tool card, which I really like.
So funny.
So you can put that in Lost Box and then turn off the tool with that, or just in like an Arceus deck, if all of your basics have 1 retreat except for your Arceuses, you can play that over a switch card and then just retreat into something and then kill the Iron Hands with Max Belt Arceus.
It's so dumb that it's almost a reason to make me put Beach Court in Lost Box, but it's very funny. I was going to add too, so Jake and a bunch of other people on the previous pods, like Nick, I think Gabe too, have all talked about the Raichu reboot pod strat for the deck. And you brought up the energy switch, which actually fixes one of the big problems with it, which is if you don't pre-charge up the Raichu, you can't really get it. You can't just play it down and then attack.
It all in one turn.
Yeah.
I don't want to be allowing for anything like that. And I also play Forest Sealstone in my list, which a lot of other lists don't even have a V-Star power, which
V-Star.
in this deck, it just feels like you should be having I could go get whatever card I want.
Especially when you play so many Arvins, right? So it's just a free card whenever.
My list is wildly different than a lot of other people's lists.
Okay.
I have Squawkabilly. I have other things.
Sure.
So if you're subscribed to the website, just go check out the article. It's been out for a couple weeks, and I detail a lot of stuff about the format and Iron Hands as a whole.
Cuttertap.com. So yeah, Lugia, the deck that Iron Hands trashes, but is still the top 3 most popular decks, and is very good for a lot of reasons. What is everyone's thoughts on this, kind of at a high level, I guess?
I mean, I think Lugia's like, aside from Iron Hands decks, it's got like a pretty solid matchup spread. It sort of feels like it has a similar game plan to like current format pre-rotation Gardevoir, where you're just setting up and then attacking with single prizers that one-shot everything for the rest of the game. And so when you run to Iron Hands, it's rough because they can trade evenly and take the first KO. But against everything else, it's fine. And then a big draw to playing Lugia is that it's got a really great control matchup.
Yeah.
Anything with Snorlax, and Snorlax beats basically every other deck in the format. So yeah, there's if you're scared about Snorlax, Lugia's
just play
Lugia's
Lugia.
the answer. Yeah,
for sure.
So I think Lugia is gatekeeping Snorlax from being like the best deck in the format. Otherwise, it would be, definitely a hard thing to beat. And like Snorlax can, like, as soon as tech cards become like popular, it's pretty easy to find counters for them. Like there's always Mawile for Minior, or like the Devo TM Eerie thing for the Gengar, or just Lost Citying stuff with Pidgeot. So yeah, I think Lugia having that good matchup against Snorlax is sort of balancing things out for now, but we'll see how that changes. If Iron Hands Dex goes up, then Snorlax becomes a lot more powerful.
Sure.
Yeah, I don't put Lugia in top 3 as power level. I will put it, however, in top 3 to 5 for popularity. So I do expect to play against some Lugia. Personally, out of all the top decks, for me, Lugia has had the lowest win rate into decks I'm trying and the top decks, just in my experience. I feel like it asks a lot. The Cincino version, as a Charizard or a Chen Pao player, you have ways to pick off Cincino and Archeops on right turns. That all being said, having a one prizer that can do 330 damage is extremely strong, and the deck doesn't have to ask for too much in the beginning of the game besides Pokemon. And I think maybe that's where I kind of rank the deck lower, because I'm not super fond of Capturing Aroma Great Ball being the ball engine for this type of deck, although it is what we have to work with. Yeah, I definitely don't dislike the deck. It's definitely my least favorite top deck, but I do think it commands respect. And like Jake said, it's just one of those decks that, with him and Arceus kind of together, Arceus and Lugia kind of check the same decks, and those decks kind of keep stuff like the Great Tusk, the Controls, wacky decks. They kind of keep them from being way too out of hand. So I appreciate Lugia's presence, but I would not be playing Lugia personally over something like a Chen Pao or a Charizard at the moment.
Yeah. So the next deck I wanted to mention is one that was kind of getting a lot of hype because it did pretty well at Champions League. At least a lot of different variants of it did well at Champions League, which is Arceus. And it's kind of been almost non-existent in the online tourneys. It's been very underplayed, at least. It's done pretty well in a couple spots here and there. It's mostly been some kind of wackier list. But there's a lot of different ways to play Arceus right now. You can still do the Armor's Fire stuff. You can do Arceus Vulpix type stuff. You can do Argudra type stuff. Arctina, of course, is there, and people are doing Arceus Giratina with like Aerodactyl is another option that people are playing around with. So we have the Arceus expert here, Braiden. Why don't you talk about your thoughts on Arceus in this format and where people are kind of going and why it's not maybe been too popular?
Yeah, so I think Arceus is pretty good coming into this format. You know, Arceus Vulpix has a lot of good matchups into like Charizard, Chien Pao, Control. But the Lugia matchup, it's not very good. And even the Iron Hands matchup, it's not very good. So I would say stay away from that one. But Arctina, that one, yeah, you have a chance against all the top decks right now. So as long as you can set up, which is the deck's hardest part, I think, you can beat everything. And Arc Armourouge, the deck gains the what's that? Gouging Fire.
Yeah.
So you have another way to one shot everything. And if you can get your Heatran going, I don't see how anything beats that either. But I'm biased. Always.
How would you rank like the different arc variants right now for like how you think they would do at EUIC?
The fire one is definitely the best.
Okay.
In my opinion, because you just have so many options. You have the Delphox, the Heatran, the Radiant Heatran. You could just go out of nowhere. If your opponent starts attacking with a Greninja, all of a sudden you switch your energy to a Mew and attack them back with Greninja. Yeah, it's just so good.
Makes a lot of sense. Yeah, it's definitely. I know you are biased for it. You did play it to Vancouver, and you played a lot
There's
in
no
general.
other rankings, by the way. It's just Arc Fire. That's the answer.
Oh, it's just Arc
Oh
Fire.
right, yeah. Would Arctina be your second in that ranking?
Yeah,
That makes sense. Yeah. All Arc picks needs like a very specific meta. It seems like. Yeah, and then like.
Can you put Vulpix in the Arc Fire deck? We have Arc Fire Vulpix.
I mean, you certainly could. I don't think you need it. I don't know what it would really improve.
It only needs one water, so there you go.
Yeah, I'm just concerned about the Chen Pao matchup mainly. It seems like it's tough for basically anything. But if Chen Pao is like cutting Manaphy, which some of them are for some reason, then it's probably okay because you have a lot of snipe options.
Yeah, you have a lot of ways to knock out Chen Pao now, so it's not as bad with Max Belt plus Arc, and then Heatran, and then Gouging Fire. So you have three different ways to kill the Chen Pao.
Have you? Oh, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say I quite like Arceus. I think I've played a lot of Arceus decks over the past couple seasons, and it always feels like in these newer formats where everything is kind of getting figured out that Arceus gets to sneak in and kind of just hang out and be like, "Sup, guys? You guys forgot about me," and then come catch a dub. So I definitely like pretty much all. I'm not big on the Vulpix. I think if you're going to play Vulpix, you need to include like something else. You need to be playing like the Gudra, or you need to be playing like some the Japanese lists are playing like Noivern as their other guy. So I wouldn't hate something like that where you have multiple lock options, but you just lock yourself into the Vulpix. I think is probably not the best. I like Arctina. Feels pretty good into a decent amount of things. Can play the Iron Leaves to help versus Charizard. I think all of them have their own merits, although I will agree here with Braiden that Fire to me seems like the best because we're in a format where we don't like Arc's comeback was with Path and Iono. We don't have Path. So I feel like the better thing to do is just change their hand and knock them out. I think that's the best type of check you can do, which you could argue you could do with Arctina, but anybody who's played Arctina at an event knows it's a pile, and I enjoy the fire.
Definitely a pile.
I think also, Max Belt is just a huge card for like Arceus decks in general. Being able to one shot like basic EXs with your Arceus is just so huge for the deck.
Yeah, I was actually going to mention Max Belt during the Lugia part. I think one of the things kind of hurting Lugia is the fact that their consistency feels so bad that they're forced to play Master Ball over an A-Spec that could actually help them win games. Like Maximum Belt or even Prime Catcher is still like pretty helpful too. But just being able to hit like 230 or being able to actually hit 230 with Lugia or 230 with Snorlax especially would be incredibly helpful. But the fact that most people are still pressured to play the Master Ball kind of says a lot about the deck, unfortunately. But it's still very strong, very good. And echo a lot of same thoughts for Arceus stuff. The next deck I want to talk about was Stall/Control. Piper actually put out a really good article on cuttertap.com that goes into kind of tier lists for the different variants and some example lists and stuff. You can check that out. Really, really good. And I found it very useful just kind of to understand how scared I should be for EUIC. But yeah, Jake, what do you think about Stall and Control in this round? We talked about it a little bit with how Lugia is keeping it in check to some degree, but
yeah, I mean, I think it's got a really, really great matchup spread. Especially like the Pidgeot version has like options for pretty much every deck in the format except for Lugia. So you can play like the heavy temple, boring, regular, just quad Snorlax deck and beat most of the format. That sadly is probably like the version with the best matchup spread overall. But yeah, I think it's a deck to worry about. It's probably not gonna like reach the top 5 in play rate or anything like that, because these decks always end up on the lower end. But I wouldn't be surprised if like a bunch of good players play it and do really well with it, or just even normal people who just miss Lugia, dodge Lugia every round, hit the barrel decks, and then play counter catcher twice and shake their opponent's hands, and then yeah, we'll probably see some of those doing well at a EUIC.
Yeah, I'm also in favor of the Pidgeot version, or like the tempo control with the ability to attack. I think Radiant's Art is like a big selling point for the deck for me. I'm not big on the quad Snorlax. Again, I feel like decks like Arceus and decks like Lugia just run you over. And I also think like if you ran up against any of the mill decks, or even just the mirror with Pidgeot, they're going to be able to get to you faster than you will. Just simply based on them being able to search out fire energy, which the other deck cannot do until they draw into it. So, yeah, I really like the comeback potential of it. I think it's a really strong deck. I think the trade off of Pidgeot is, unfortunately, your early game is very frail and you can lose very fast games to not setting up if your opponent can pick off your Pidgey. But I think if you're playing a deck like Control, if that's your risk, is setting up, but once you set up, you win. I think that's the right type of risk of a really successful Control deck.
Yeah, I think with just having so many like essentially auto wins in the format, I think anybody can pick up Control and just hit a few auto wins, maybe win one close matchup, and all of a sudden you're in day 2 because it's all you need. And nobody likes to test against Control, so nobody knows the matchups. You can just sneak by.
I definitely think this is one of the events where people will be most likely to test against control install, but there will still be a lot of people who don't. Or just
I
try to
think
like dodge
It's
it.
the
not fun.
majority of above average players will respect it and play against it.
Yeah.
And below average players will probably either respect it without playing the matchup and just throw some tech into their deck, or they'll play something like the Lugia Arc and just say, I'm just gonna, if I ever hit one, I'm just gonna have a free matchup, you know? So
Yeah.
I don't think that anyone above like below average is gonna be really concerned with beating stall and actually playing the matchup comparatively to other decks.
Yeah. EYC is just such a big event though that you're gonna have so many average players.
Exactly.
Sure, sure. Kind of a side note that too is it's been talked about a lot on Twitter, but Snorlax Stall is like swarming the Pokemon trading card game live ladder right now because it's just really fast wins because people just auto concede and stuff. So if you want practice against the matchup, just go hit the play button on your client and you'll get all the practice you want. So yeah, so kind of general expectations for the meta. We kind of talked about what we expect to be popular, what wouldn't we expect. So let's just kind of go around and say, what do you think the top 3 meta share decks will be? We can start with Braden.
Number 1, Charizard for sure. The deck is just too good. I think Chien Pao will be number 2.
Okay.
And then, number 3, I'm gonna say Iron Hands, even though, I don't think it's that good, but I think a lot of people will play it.
Jake.
Yeah, I think it's going to be Charizard. Then I'd say Lugia number 2. And then number 3 is probably like a pretty large drop off. I think like Charizard and Lugia be like definitely number 1 and 2. And then maybe the Iron Hands deck, Chen Pao or Arctina could show up there. Yeah, I think it'll be Charizard on top. Then like a few percent down Lugia, then a few more percent down, just a bunch of like 8 to 10% decks.
Sure.
Yeah, mine is Charizard, Chen Pao, and I'm not including Lugia in my top 3. I have the I'm going to cheat a little bit, but I'm just the culmination of the Lost Turbo and the Lost Tina, which I think are becoming found out and becoming more popular. And just as Japan and other online tournaments will start happening, or just like over there, we'll start to realize that these Lost decks gain some good pieces. And I think with both of them combined, they can maybe reach like 10 to 11% between
Sure.
both of them. I think personally that anyone who's been testing a lot of Lugia or who is just starting to testing and playing Lugia will quickly find out that it is not all that it stands up to be, in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't think Lugia is that good of a deck for the record, but I just think it's going to be like it's a deck that people would just pick up. Like we've seen over the past few months as tournaments have gotten bigger, like the percentages of easy decks to play have like gone up by a lot. Like Miraidon and Roaring Moon and Charizard are like consistently the number 1, 2, or Roaring Moon and Miraidon have swapped places in this past format. But I think if a deck is easy to pick up, it's going to have a high play rate just because there's so many people at the tournament. But if you're like a player like thinking you're going to make day 2, you probably have to think about like a completely different metagame from what is actually going to show up in day 1, because those casual players aren't going to be making day 2.
I guess by that, maybe I would put Arctina or Lugia in there just because I guess you're asking popularity. But me personally, I think the third deck that I think will do good and will show up in numbers is just the Lost Box decks. I guess I should rephrase that. But
sure.
Yeah, I just think the Lost Box decks demand some respect. And there are a lot of people who are not respecting how strong both versions of the Lost Tina and the Turbo Lost Box have in this meta.
Yeah. I think Zard easily number 1. Now I'm like doubting putting Lugia in top 3, honestly, after all we talked about. But I'll say Lugia for 3. For second deck, maybe I just copy Jake. I don't know. Yeah, I think it'll be like Zard, Lugia, and I think it will actually be Iron Hands in 3. I do think it's a kind of combination of everything everyone said. It's one of those fast, aggressive decks that people like to play. It is very easy to play compared to some other decks in the format, and it still puts out incredibly good results against a lot of the decks. And if people expect Lugia to be popular, then you're just getting a lot of free wins there as well, without even really having to try like at all. I think that's like enough reason to put it in very popular. And people just want to play new stuff too. A lot of players, let's get again with an event this big, a lot of casual players will just want to play the new thing, and a lot of people have just been playing the new stuff since the set has come out, which is totally understandable. And they might just kind of gravitate towards it. So, I totally echo what you're saying, Hunter. I think the Lost Zone decks will have some of the best conversion rates for day 2 besides Zard, for sure.
I think Lost Zone will be number 1 conversion rate, like by far, going into day 2.
I would also bet.
Yeah, I also agree with that. I just don't think that many people are playing the deck. So I
was gonna say, don't say that's the only deck I've been testing for like a month. Don't say that.
And that's why
it's really good
because it's something that I encounter, and I think other people will encounter this. So I'll give the skip for you guys. But when you start playing these top decks against each other, you start to realize that a lot of these things can get picked off by stuff like Devolution, stuff like Sableye. Cram is really good in this format, like incredibly good. The Stupid Punch is good if you want to play that.
Yep.
Tina is having access to Star Requiem and then having Iron Leaves makes Charizard a lot less than a 50-50. I think you could still definitely lose as the Tina player, but you have the available tools if you draw them.
For sure.
So I really like the Lost Zone decks right now, and I think most people, once they cycle through these, the Lugias, the Arceus, and they start branching out to other stuff, they'll see how strong like the Rescue Board, and maybe if people try the Cryptomaniac and all these other Pokemon deck and Lost Box can get pretty spicy.
Yeah, I think I'm actually gonna say Tina might have like number 1 conversion rate, honestly, because I think just being able to have such a stronger Zard matchup than it used to is just really important. And I think just in general, the fact that it can handle like literally everything is just so good too. Are there any decks that you think people are underrating right now compared to decks we haven't really talked too much about? I guess Lost Box and Lost Tina, we just kind of mentioned were underrated. But anything else you think people should be kind of paying more attention to, whether they be decks that are not doing great online or just not being overly represented, or just haven't been seeing a lot of play in like Japan either? Anything like that?
I'll give my spicy take that I think Espathra is really good. Being able to take a good Charizard matchup, you have the Banette in there to try and lock Chi-Pal's energies. You know, you just cheese some wins here and there, and it's all you need.
I'm a big Golden Go enjoyer at the moment. I think
Yeah.
a lot of people are not giving it the time of day, and it got not only benefits from the rotation, but gets to use, in my opinion, two of the best cards in this set, which is the Cryptomaniac or Cypher, whatever they changed this thing to. They changed the name.
Cypher Maniacs code
Something,
breaking.
The scans
I
were going
think.
out. I'm like, okay, is it Codebreaker? Is it Cryptomaniac? Now we're here. It's literally changed name like 6 times. But that and Prime Catcher. And I think having access to both those cards in one deck is super, super sick. Draw a bunch of cards. Palkia is also super underrated right now as an attacker, barring the Lightning deck, the straight Iron Hands. Palkia gets very good value in this format. There's not a lot of things that hit 280 in the early game, speaking versus Charizard as well. You can get the 2-shot in there, pick off Rotoms, pick off Luminions. I think the deck's really strong. Not having Path, gaining Buddy Poppin was like literally infinitely broken for the deck. Like VIP, having to draw a VIP pass in the early game to actually set up was such a hindrance for the deck, and now you don't have to. So I've been a Golden Go enjoyer, although I think, again, my take on the Lost Box, you really don't want to play against any of the Lost Box decks. So
Yeah.
there are things, or anything fire. You don't want to play against Arc Fire. That's
Yeah.
So they're out there you don't want to play against, but I think it's definitely not getting respect, and I think people will give it a go and enjoy making it rain.
Yeah, I think it's a deck that can definitely do totally well at EUIC, and yeah, you don't have to play 4 workers anymore, so that's hype. It's really great.
Nope, fun. We got double computer search instead.
Yeah.
You don't want to play Nimona?
A what?
Oh yeah, Nemona's backpack, dude. You can
Nemona's
spam
backpack,
Nemona
bro.
all you want.
Yeah.
I didn't even think of that. And I like Morty too. I think Morty's a really cool card.
Yeah.
But a lot of people are just Morty in general, not in Golden Go, just Morty in general. I think Morty is a really cool supporter card that could see some play in a decent amount of decks, especially like if anybody's trying these future boxes or like any of these Pokestop Turbo decks. Like Morty can just draw you a bunch of cards. There's a lot of big benches right now, so I think Morty is being undervalued as a nice sidekick supporter.
Yeah, Japan definitely is liking the Morty a lot more than we are internationally. They've been throwing in a lot of stuff, and yeah, it's been very underplayed here for sure. And then next topic, kind of last thing for EUIC before we wrap that up is just any advice. We are now a week and a half away from the event. Advice for deck selection / general final week of prep advice. What do y'all have?
I always like to say that you should pick a deck at least a week in advance and stick with it. Play all the top matchups at least 5 times, and just be confident. If you do that, you'll do much better.
Yeah, I think for this format in general, it's one where, at least for me, I've been spending the past like 3 months trying to find something that beats everything, but it's looking like it's one of those formats where you just gotta accept some bad matchups in places.
There's 40 decks, you can't beat them all.
Yeah, I know.
He's holding out on us.
Too many decks. I hate that.
The format's not even there yet. We don't.
Yeah. So yeah, I think picking where you're going to take your losses at this point is definitely where I'd be. If not, choosing a deck as soon as possible. Just picking which decks you're okay losing to, and then finding which deck sort of fits the best matchup spread against the rest, and then sticking with it. And just try to also play something that doesn't like lose to janky stuff as well, because those are always like more popular. We could see random decks pop up that people haven't thought of or whatnot. You want to make sure that you're not getting caught off guard playing some like complicated deck that only has like specific. The deck only works against like certain things, but if you run into random jank, you'll lose, which is an issue with picking decks sometimes.
Yeah, just to kind of reiterate, I kind of said this a little bit earlier, but these types of formats really hint or really produce good results for decks that were good pre-rotation, pre-new set, and then finding a way to utilize not only the best of the new cards, but also to utilize the information that you have of the popular decks, to be able to just either tech appropriately, or like Jake said, pick your loss appropriately so that the rest of your deck is not mucked up with extra techs. I definitely think this is a tournament where you want to have multiple options. So for me personally, I think anything super linear, like let's say the mill deck, I think I would stray away from something so linear that where you only have like one thing you can do or two things you can do. I think that's a little less valuable at this specific tournament. And then the last thing I'll say is just don't eat the English breakfast. It's terrible. No, I'm not on London people, but baked beans and tomato, it's not it.
No beans
I
on
tried it
toast?
twice, not once, not once, twice, and it was terrible both times. So just don't eat that, and you won't get sick, and you won't feel terrible when you're playing the tournament. And that's just the success rate. Ups the success rate.
Cool. Get it.
Good advice.
I'm excited to try beans on toast. I've heard
Oh God,
horrible things.
eat it at home, dude. You don't gotta go.
I gotta make that at home. Yeah.
You don't gotta take a picture and eat it in public, bro. Just put some on your toast at home.
The last question I wanted to go over from Twitter was from DJ Cirque, asking, what is the BDIF? They also asked, why is it Goldengo? You kind of already covered that, Hunter. But in general, really quickly, BDIF, everybody. What do you think?
Charizard.
Yeah. Not close.
Makes sense. Yep.
Charizard is the best deck right now, but I don't think it's the best deck in format.
Sure. It is the first event of the format. Obviously, we saw how
I
much
like
things
a little
changed.
Bit of data for this question. I feel like best deck in format can't be answered till the end of the format. Maybe this is just me skewing up the question and being complicated. But
we had to hyperbolize. That's what podcasters do. We have to make dramatic claims as early as possible.
Yeah, I'm gonna say that Charizard is on top for now.
Yeah,
that's what I'll say.
Yeah, it's definitely.
I could see a Lost Zone box takeover eventually, but I think Charizard's definitely right now.
Yeah, I would not be surprised to see it after.
Takeover too.
Yeah, that too.
I can see Chen. That one. Both of them seem likely, but Chen Pao for me feels like a little more like it's going to start getting pretty ridiculous, especially when we start getting other sets too. Like it's just going to keep building on the nonsense.
Time to start putting scissor in your decks.
Yay! Hey, does Goldengo have a good matchup? I guess. No.
Goes first and takes two prizes every turn. They win.
Well, I would differ on this opinion. I think it does matter who gets their Greninja combo off first. If I go first and I get my Greninja combo off, also Chen Pao's, like Jake was saying, are opting to cut Manaphy, which is really good for Goldengo, considering you have your Manaphy and they don't. So you might even get to squeak some of those. I don't think that's going to be a trend that sticks around, but it is a trend right now. The other thing too I like about the matchup is that Chen Pao generally has to have a lot more going. They have to have a stage 2. My deck stage 1s, so I can kind of pawn the I'm going to kill 3 backs caliber game, and that can be the way I can win the game if 6 prizes don't become taken.
Cool. All right. That's going to be it for this episode of the Dead Draw Gaming Podcast. I want to shout out our sponsors, Dual Spec and Cut or Tap. We also have a new Patreon going up that you can subscribe to get some bonus content. We're going to record some bonus content with this squad for that Patreon in just a moment here. So if you want to check that out, we're going to talk about some rogue decks. You can check that out over on the Patreon. The link will be in the description below. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Again, we're trying to get to 1,000 subs for the Dead Draw Gaming YouTube channel. We'd really appreciate any support. Even if you can't do the Patreon, if you can at least subscribe to the channel, it would mean a lot to me. So thank you so much, and we'll see you all in 2 weeks after EUIC. Bye-bye.